Hey folks, welcome to the 65 Corvette update. We're building this car as a charity auction for charities, including Jamie's Fund for Battered and Abused Women. In this episode, Dave's going to get the fuel system installed. It's much easier to install everything from fuel tanks to the lines with the body off the frame.
So, for our 65 special project car, we got the gas tank in from Tanks Inc. and we're gonna go ahead and get it all set up so we can mount it on there. I was kind of freaking out when I first pulled it out of the box because I was like, why is there 3 holes? But I forgot this is a filler hole for the Corvette. And then you got your pump hole and your sending unit hole. So I'm just kind of unboxing everything, just making sure everything's here. This is our sending unit setup. This is our pump. This is a 255 gallon per hour pump, which is plenty for the LS that we're running with all the accessories, the gaskets, and all the hardware to mount everything to the tank. Something cool that you'll notice here in a little bit, well, when I actually go to put it on the tank, is that these Corvettes have a special strap because I haven't opened it yet. We'll go ahead and open it. So these Corvettes, everything's on the top of them. So what you got to do is it comes with this special bracket right here. And what that does is your strap on a factory Corvettes, they run right here. So you got to have something, because this is where your sending unit is. So it's like a little bridge for the strap itself. It's a pretty neat little design the way they did it. So I've already installed the filler net coupling on there. So the next thing I'm going to do is they give you all the instructions that you need as far as installing the pump, because every pump's going to be different. So they give you the way to measure it, because measuring for depth of the tank and exactly where to put the pump. That way it sits about 1/4 inch from the bottom of the tank. I like to make them a little tighter because the sock, once it gets wet, it'll actually get smaller in size. So I want to make sure that thing's really down there in the bottom, so when it's empty, it's empty. And then we have the sending unit, and this is the same thing. You'll do the same thing with this as well. This will be, everything's adjustable, and then it's just depending on which tank you have, Chevelle, Camaro, Corvette, whatever it is, C10s, on where to set the float adjustment and all that stuff to read the fuel gauge. So I got all that unpacked. So we're gonna start with the fuel pump, and I'm gonna get the fuel pump assembled and get it mounted in the tank. So the first things you got to do is you got to take a measurement from the bottom of the tank to the top of the flange. So on this one, usually it's around 8 inches or so. All right, so this one's a little bit deeper. So total width or depth, 9 1/8 to the top of the flange. So I'll just get me a piece of scrap paper here and write it all down. So total will be 9 1/8 total depth. I'll write it down because I forget a lot. You put your pump together. I don't do much instructional videos, so I'm new at this, but I've done a few of these tanks, so it's a little familiar to me. What I'll do is I'll put this sock on here. This is a filter sock. All right, so I got that on there. And then they want you to measure from the top of the pump. Well, you don't want to go from the top of the pump. You kind of just want to go a little bit higher because it's actually the bottom of your sending hose, which is the black hose on here, where it's going to land on here. And you want that measurement, okay? So we'll measure that. You're looking, it's right about 4, we'll say 4.5 inches heavy. So let's say 4 5/8. Yeah, that's a good number, 4 5/8. And that's gonna be your P measurement, which is pump measurement. And then as far as where you wanna cut this hose, it tells you right here, measurement D minus the pump measurement. You take those two, so we'll take the D pump measurement and the P pump measurement. So that's going to be I will use a calculator for this. Don't make fun of me, everybody. So almost 4 3/4. So it's looking at around 4 3/4 is where you want the bottom of this measurement. But what I like to do is just get a visual. So if my total depth, pump and stock and everything to the bottom of this thing is going to be, because I know that the total depth is 9 1/8. So I'll go here, I'll set it beside it, 9 1/8. We're looking right about there, and then I'll come down to 9. That'll pump me up about 1/8 to a light quarter off of there. So I see where that's at. Then let me get my marking pen. So I'll mark that. And that's from, plus you want to add a little bit of depth for the gasket. So right now, 9 1/8 hits right there. And then I'm going to go bring it up about 1/8 and a little shy for the gasket. And that's about where I'm going to go. And then I'll do this. And right there, I'll cut it. That's where I want it. Take the pump. Should have a. Now, these lines right here, you kind of got to heat them up to get them together. So one thing I suggest is do not forget to put your clamp on this hose, because once that's heated up and put on there, it's really no coming back from that. So make sure you put your hose clamp on there. We have our pump right here. So what I like to do is kind of just get it ready, because it's going to be sitting like that. So I'll make some indexing marks, because in the top is where your two lines will come out for your power and your ground. So I like to make sure that when I put it on there that I index it correctly. So and I'll make a little mark on the hose. There we go. So I got my 2 marks there indexed, so that way when I slide this on there, you can kind of see that my 2 openings for my wires and my harness clip, they're pretty much in line. So that way it's not all twisted around and you're not doing all kinds of crazy stuff with it. There we go. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna warm this up. Now what I'm doing is I'm heating up this hose so it'll move. We're gonna put it on the pump. While it's still warm. Just like that. I'll let that cool off for a second. Make sure that's cool. So while that's cooling off, we can slide this down a little bit. I'll do so. There we go. Now that's on and tight. We'll take our harness. Kind of said harness like a pirate. Harness. All right, that's enough. That's enough of that. All right. So get that clipped in. This one up through here. And then once you tighten these bolts right here, it becomes liquid, waterproof or liquid proof or whatever you want to say. It's that way gas isn't coming out of there, because all this sits in the tank. There we go. So we got that. Now what we'll do is the return hose about 1 inch up from the bottom of the pump. So get our choppers wherever they went. Yeah. I'll just kind of guesstimate on that. We'll just chop it, say right around there. It's like a good spot. All right, so we'll do that. And then I will take off the filter, put on the, it's like a noise deadening, you know, kind of keeps the noise down on the pump. I mean, that's what I think it's for, but people may disagree with me, but it just keeps the noise down inside the tank. And that's one of the main reasons why we use these when we do our LS swaps, because we don't want them noisy. You want to enjoy the car, not hear, you know, a frame mounted fuel pump making all kinds of noise, which, you know, we've had videos about that before. So what I'm doing here is I'm zip tying the return hose to the pump with their supplied zip ties that they give us. There's that. And we'll just clip off the tails here. Now, with this, I believe they sit going this way. So I want to make sure I index my filter that way, because there's a baffle in here. There's just a baffle in here for keeping the gas from splashing around too much. So if I put it in there this way, then it'll hit the baffle and we'll be able to get it in. So I want to do something like this, but first thing before I do that, I'm going to stick the pump in here. And I'm going to start indexing all the bolt holes. So that's how that's going to go. So I'll take a little marker, because it can just be a pain in the butt to line up everything. So I'll make a mark, and I'll make a mark on the pump. I'll pull that out, pull that back out, and we'll get the gasket. Now I'll line up the gasket, which, see, first try, nice. All right. And I'll put a mark on that. And then that way, everything's gonna sit in there like this. We'll put our strainer on, which is on there. Everything's hooked up, clipped in. I'm gonna do one little snug on all my clamps to make sure everything's nice and tight. Because you don't wanna have to pull this back out, especially in a Corvette, because there's really no access to it. Once you put the body on it, it's there. So you wanna make sure you double check everything. All your lines, make sure everything is tight. The top, we'll make sure everything is snugged up and tight once we get all the wiring set up. So you have your sending side, your return, and then you have a vent. This is a tank vent. So, you know, everything's pretty much sealed in this, so you gotta have a way to vent the pressure that builds up while it's splashing around and driving, or when you're filling it up. If you didn't have that, well, Corvette's not so much because of how big their filling holes are, but you got a smaller filling hole, like say a regular one, like on a, you know, Chevelle or Camaro or something. You fill it up, and the air's got to go somewhere. That you're putting fuel in it, you're putting liquid in it. The air has to go somewhere. So what does it typically do? If it's not vented, it's just going to shoot back out of the filler hole. You know, so that's what these vents do. These vents relieve pressure, and then at the end of these vents, we put it's actually a rollover vent. So in a case, you know, God forbid, the car should roll over, there's a little ball valve in there. That way, if it rolls over, gas won't leak out of the gas tank. So that's a safety thing there that we use. And Tank sends these with their tanks, these little ball valves. And you can hear it. You can hear it. It's there's a little ball in there. So when you mount them, you want to mount them up. That way the ball's sitting and you can vent. That way, in case the car rolls over, it actually will shut the vent off, and you won't be able to, gas won't leak out of the gas tank. So, we got everything lined up here, and got all our hardware here. Oh. So what I like to do is just go through and just kind of get them all started. And be very careful with these fine thread bolts in these tanks, because one little small, you know, starting it crooked, it'll cross thread it really quickly. The hardware is good hardware, but if you're not paying attention, you'll cross thread the bolts, and it's just a nightmare from there, because you won't be able to you'll have to drill it out, make it a bigger hole, re-thread it, and it just becomes a mess. So just take your time putting these bolts in, make sure that you are catching the threads correctly. You know, and I just kind of got a feel for it. And they have little O-rings on the bottom here, so they're not only they sealed at the gasket, they're sealed at the bolts as well. So I just kind of sit it in there, spin it around until I feel like it's catching. There we go. So now that I got that, I'll go ahead and put it on my little driver here. Now I'm not hammering, I'm not really, you know, I'm not driving them home in this thing. I'm just kind of snugging them all up just to save some time as far as putting them in. I'm just doing like you would do on a wheel, you know, star pattern. That way it gets brought down in an gets brought down evenly. If you go too fast or too hard, you could rip those little O-rings that are on the bottom of those bolts. So you want to be careful with that. And I'm just being real easy with my trigger here and just kind of putting it in there real easy. And then I'll do a final snug with a hand ratchet just to get a feel for it. So I'll just keep kind of going around in a star pattern. So I feel like it's, you know, tight and snugged up enough where they're not going to just come loose, but it ain't going to be over tightened, because you can over tighten these up pretty quickly. All right, so that's in. Everything's looking good there. I'm gonna grab my light, look down in the tank. Yep. It's kind of sitting on that one tube a little bit, but that's fine. That's just a bypass tube throughout all the baffles, but right where the pump is and all that, it's just sitting just barely touching the bottom, and that's right where you want it. So that's pretty much it as far as the pump goes. You know, the only thing I can really say is when you read your instructions, you know, read the instructions. The instructions don't lie. I know I kind of guessed a little bit on some of the things just because I've done a few of these, and I just know what I'm looking for as far as where I'm setting it in here. But if you follow the instructions to a T, you won't have a problem. So next thing we're going to do with the Tanks Inc. is we're going to install their sending unit. Now this is the device that reads how much fuel you have in your tank. I know that I will be cutting some of this off just because this will go all the way to, I think, 14-inch deep tank, I believe. Something like that. I don't know. I don't want to be a liar, so I'm not sure. So let's see. The float side is here. So you'll start with what the instructions say. You want to measure the tank. We'll measure the tank at the sending unit. And we're right about the same. Right to the top of the tank is 9 inches. I'll grab my trusty notebook here again. And 9 inch, and we'll just put the D as depth of the tank. From the bottom of the sending unit, well actually it's going to not be just the bottom of the sending unit, the bottom of the sending unit with the gasket to the center of where your access is for your float. They want that half the distance of the tank. So this is going to be the midpoint of how high it goes and how low it drops. So what we'll start with right now is I'm going to kind of disassemble this, because I know from experience that I can't just loosen this up, and it's only going to be about 4.5 inches from here, which is half the depth of the tank. So I'm going to take a second here and I'm going to take this all apart. And it tells you in the instructions, you know, how to do it and to take it apart. But like I said, I've done a few of these and I know that this is not going to work with what we need it to do. So I just take it all apart. Save your hardware, because you do need to reuse some of it again. All right, so there we go. I'll just unravel that. Take this. this is what you get rid of. This is for the really deep tanks. So I like to wrap this up a little bit on here, get some of the slack so it's not just floating around in the tank. Stick this back on here. Oh, make sure you stick it back on the right way. There we go. So now with the gasket on it, to the center, we are going to measure 4.5 inches. Now this is pretty critical doing this part, because if you don't do it correctly, say you put it up too high, it'll tell you you're out, but you actually do have more. But if you hang it up too low, the float will sit on the bottom of the tank, but it's not actually all the way down at the bottom. So it'll show 1/8 quarter of a tank, but you're sitting on the bottom, you have no gas. So this is pretty critical. So with the gasket in the sending unit, we're gonna measure 4.5 to the center, which is about there. And then I'll flip this around, put our screws back in, and I'll just snug them up. That way I can fine adjust it. So I can still kind of move that around. So right at 4.5 is where I want to be. Turn it around. Snug those up. For a little extra insurance, I always like to check after my battery tools, because if a battery is low, it'll make it feel like it's tight, but it's not tight. So all right, so there's our sending unit where our float will be sitting. I want to double check my measurement. Yep, so right on 4.5 from the bottom of the gasket. Now, all right, it's time for me to wash my hands and stuff. The rest of the process is going to be, like I said, cutting this tail off and setting the float. Where you have to, how do you set it on here so it reaches. So after I eat, we'll come back and I'll finish up setting this up, and hopefully we can get our tank mounted to the Corvette today.
Thanks for joining us. We have a lot going into this build and hope it can raise some important funds for a good cause and be a dream car for a new owner. We're thankful to you following along with these builds from home. Thank you for doing those things to help us get more traction, like hitting that like, subscribe, and notification bell, and leave a comment below. Take care, folks.